In Virginia, the 2025 governor's race is shaping up to be one of the most closely watched elections in the country. On one side, we have Democrat Abigail Spanberger, a centrist with strong fundraising power and growing statewide appeal. On the other, Republican Winsome Earle-Sears, the current lieutenant governor, who has recently hitched her campaign firmly to the Trump-era GOP brand. But here's the problem. That brand has become toxic in many states, and Virginia is no exception. And no matter how much she leans into the MAGA talking points in hopes of saving her campaign, all signs point to one conclusion. Winsome Earle-Sears is likely to lose.
Do you support the president's purge of the federal workforce, yes or no?
Oh, okay. If this is the way you want to go, then go ahead. But I'm just not going to participate.
Okay,
because I want to talk about real issues.
Really? Not a real issue that thousands of Virginians are losing their jobs?
I want to talk about real issues.
It's a real issue that Sears supports Trump.
Despite Virginia currently having Republicans in leadership, the landscape in Virginia has widely favored Democrats. And with a polarizing president at the top of the ticket, Republicans have already felt the pains of his policies. Polling has shown Spanberger leading Earle-Sears by nearly 10 points throughout the race among likely voters. Earlier in the year, that gap was even wider, with Spanberger up 17 points. Yes, Earle-Sears has managed to close the margin somewhat, but from the dysfunction of her campaign and now trying to rally MAGA on her side, she has a steep hill to climb in a state where Democrats have won every major statewide contest since 2012. Except for Glenn Youngkin's upset victory in 2021.
NBC News has determined that when all the votes are in, Glenn Youngkin is the governor-elect of the Commonwealth of Virginia. He was able to piece together a victory, keeping Donald Trump at bay while going hard on state issues and not turning away all aspects of Trumpism either. But in the end, it was something like student and parent rights at school that allowed him, as a relative newcomer, to come in and defeat the one-time governor of the Commonwealth who was running for another bite at the apple.
And here's what's most important. Earle-Sears is losing independents and moderates. In today's Virginia, those voters aren't just nice to have, they're the kingmakers. The Democrats have a base that is energized against Trump. Suburban moderates have shifted blue over the last decade, largely because they've rejected the chaos and extremism of Trump-era politics.
We are talking about independence, Mr. Berman, and I will say this is the biggest warning sign, the biggest danger sign for President Trump in his second term so far. Why is that? Because it does not appear that there is a bottom to which Donald's support can't fall to. What are we talking about? Trump's net approval rating with independents. You know, there was all this hubbub about Gallup that came out this past week. You see, back in January, it was minus 2 points. Now it's minus 35 points. But what's important here is Gallup is largely matching the average. Back in January, in the average, Trump's net approval rating with independents was minus 3. Look at where it's fallen to now, minus 29 points. That is a drop of over 25 points with the key part of the electorate. If you're not winning among independents, you're probably not winning overall. And when your net approval rating's minus 29 points, you are definitely not winning overall when you're that low with independents.
In fact, when you look at the polling crosstabs, independents break decisively towards Spanberger. Moderates see Spanberger as pragmatic and steady, while they see Earle-Sears as tied to a MAGA agenda that feels out of step with Virginia's political culture. If Earle-Sears can't win back those voters, it doesn't matter how much she rallies the Republican base. The math just doesn't work.
The Republican Party seems to, or some want to, sort of move on from Donald Trump. What do you think of that? Is that fair?
But when we look at the mission, and as a Marine, we're looking at the mission, and the voters have spoken, and they have said that they want a different leader. I could not support him. I just couldn't, because we have seen, for example, in those states where he has endorsed the candidates, in fact, Republicans on the same ticket who he did not endorse overperformed, whereas his candidates totally underperformed by as much as 10 points.
And then there's the orange buffoon in the room, Donald Trump. In Virginia, Trump is political kryptonite. He lost the state in 2016. he lost it again in 2020 by an even bigger margin. And even with gains in 2024, he still lost in Virginia. And ever since his return back in office, his approval has only gotten worse.
Trump began his second term in office with a net approval rating of 7.5, meaning more Americans approved of him than disapproved, by a margin of 7 points. The net positive approval rating, though, was short-lived, and opinions on Trump have flipped. A net approval now that is underwater by 9.5 points. And it's a historically low net approval rating. More people disapprove of Donald Trump's first 100 days compared to every president in the past 70 years. He consistently trails modern presidents. He is also showing weakness on issues he has traditionally been strong on.
Earle-Sears hasn't just failed to distance herself from Trump. She's proudly tied herself to his legacy. She echoes MAGA talking points and consistently takes cues from national Republican culture wars. But in Virginia, that's not a winning formula. Suburban voters, especially women in Northern Virginia and the Richmond suburbs, turned hard against Trump. They were decisive in flipping the state blue in federal races, and they remain the key to any gubernatorial victory. By running as a Trump Republican, Earle-Sears is repelling exactly the voters she needs most. There's also a broader credibility problem. Youngkin was able to win in 2021 because he walked a tightrope, appealing to conservatives on cultural issues, while presenting himself as a business-friendly moderate. Voters who didn't like Trump could still stomach Youngkin. But Earle-Sears isn't walking that tightrope. She's sprinting across the MAGA bridge and taking on a lot of his talking points.
Our LGBTQ neighbors have the same legal rights as anyone else.
That's insane. Spanberger is for they, them, not for us.
On social issues, her record is even more damaging. In 2004, she voiced strong opposition to LGBTQ workplace protections and adoption rights, describing homosexuality as an immoral lifestyle choice. She hasn't walked those statements back. In fact, more recently, she personally annotated legislation she signed into law with notes declaring her moral opposition to abortion rights and marriage equality. These stances might thrill the far-right base, but for everyone else, they raise alarms. Virginia's younger voters, college-educated suburbanites, and urban professionals, groups that increasingly define the state's political direction, see these positions as backward. And here's the irony. Virginia Republicans know this. That's why Youngkin softened his rhetoric in 2021. That's why other Republicans talk endlessly about jobs and education, while avoiding the hot-button social fights. Earle-Sears is doing the opposite, highlighting the very issues that push swing voters away. If Earle-Sears can't inspire her base beyond MAGA diehards, Spanberger's motivated coalition of moderates, progressives, and independents will overwhelm her as they seek to vote against Trump.
What we know about the Trump presidency is that Americans don't like it. So why don't we just take a look at these new polling that we have, and he remains underwater. Look, the CBS News poll, look at that. He's 12 points underwater. You want to go over to NBC? You want a different network? You can go to a different network, but it's the exact same story. 14 points underwater. Let's talk about issues first. Okay, Trump's net approval rating. I got crime, immigration, foreign policy, the economy, trade. There's a whole slew of red, and this isn't Republican red, this is negative red. Of course, crime and immigration were two of his best issues, and now he's underwater on all of them. And then, of course, the economy, which was the reason he was re-elected in the first place. This is the one I really circle here.
So, why will Winsome Earle-Sears lose the Virginia governor's race? Because she's running a campaign that appeals to MAGA diehards, but alienates the majority of Virginians. This election isn't just about Spanberger versus Earle-Sears. It's about whether Virginia continues to reject Trump's toxic politics, or whether MAGA can find a foothold in a state that has already moved on. And judging by the numbers, the money, and the mood of the electorate, the answer is clear. Earle-Sears is on the wrong side of history. Virginia has become a testing ground for the future of American politics. If MAGA can't win here, in a purple state with a Republican governor, then it signals just how deeply unpopular Trumpism has become. And that makes this race about much more than just Virginia. It's about the future direction of the entire country. Thanks for watching. If you want more deep dives into politics and power, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.